Thank you for stopping by. I want to preface this video by saying it is by no means a knitting tutorial, but a video to provide you with a little bit of background noise while you work on your own knitting project. If you're like me, you found yourself watching several YouTube videos to kind of have something going on while you knit, but you found that you're so engaged at the video that you have lost track of your knitting, and several hours later you haven't progressed as far as you'd like, but you've watched many YouTube videos. So this is just a place to provide a solution to that if you're like me and find yourself more engaged in the video and looking at the video more than you are focused on your knitting and you're watching video after video. So thank you for coming if you think that this will be the place for you. So you might notice it's about the same part of the day that I was here just in the previous episode. I filmed for about 30 minutes with content on a hat I'm working on from the Hats On book, and in that video I have a description of the ISBN number as well as a link to a site where you can purchase the book from, as well as links to the yarn I use, the project bag I have, and several other things that might be of interest to you. And so in this video, since the hat's pretty easy, at least I identify it as easy, being a beginner / intermediate knitter and knitting for a little over a year now. I started knitting last March, so March of 2018, and at this point I feel like I'm comfortable enough to kind of push the envelope a little bit more. The previous episode I spoke about the tubular cast on and knitting and the round, which were two new things to me. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about a sock project I'm working on. And I knit a pair of socks before, and it wasn't too long ago, maybe a month or two ago is when I finished the project. It was from a book, and I plan on revisiting that pattern again because that was like my practice round where I learned a few techniques that I hadn't used before, as well as a different style of sock that is actually not as common as the sock pattern that I'm knitting today. And we will definitely talk about that at some point when I start that project up again. But for today, we're talking about more of a normal sock pattern. And let me give you a little bit of information. So I found this sock pattern on Ravelry.com, and in the description I will link to the pattern. It's free to download, and it's by, let me see the company, Tin Can Knits, and it's Ray Light is the pattern name. Soft and snuggly simple socks. And it's about, the whole document is 5 pages, front and back. And I printed it in color because I wanted to see the sock, and there's like this little diagram, and just different parts of it are bold or in color that I thought would be useful to have in color so I could actually see it, because I wasn't sure if grayscale would help me out that much. So this is like one of the only things I've printed in color. Not that that matters too much, but I preferred to knit it, to print it out in color. And this is what you would say a cuff down sock. They have tutorials on their site, tincannknits.com, and you can kind of break down this whole pattern with some video tutorials that they have available. I did not use them, at least at this point. I'm not in the section where I feel like I would struggle and would need that. But they have several sizes available: baby, toddler, child, adult, small, medium, large adult size. And in parentheses, of course, they break down what size you should focus on based on the size sock you're knitting. The yarn is, depending on what size, whatever yardage you need of fingering / sock weight yarn, and I'm using that. And your gauge is 32 stitches and 46 rounds of 4-inch stockinette on the larger size needle that you need. The needles are US size 1 or 2.25 millimeters and US size 2 or 2.75 millimeters, and these are for DPNs. They also say in parentheses or circular for magic loop. You need a stitch marker and a darning needle. I haven't listed that previously in the other videos of all the required materials, but just to kind of give you an overview. But if you're an experienced knitter, you probably already knit a million socks and probably can knit socks with your eyes closed. I went into this kind of wanting a little bit of variation without knowing what a vanilla sock was based on the previous socks I knit, when I found out this pattern isn't at all the same as the socks I knit in the other pattern book, which is a different technique altogether. So I was a little thrown off by that, especially because one of my coworkers who actually gave me the yarn I'm using today was knitting a sock at lunch once, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm knitting a sock too. And then I was watching her, because I was working on the hat project that I actually did in my previous video. I'm like, the way she's knitting doesn't look anything like the way I'm knitting that sock at home that I'm working on. And then I found out that that is a different way altogether. So this one, I am using, let me tell you what kind of yarn I'm using. This is one that she gave me. Had a whole sack. First, she gave me a lot of yarn that she was destashing, and secondly, she gave me a sack of knitting pattern books and other knitting type reading material that I really want to read the leisure stuff at some point, but right now I just flagged the knitting pattern books for projects that I want to work on later or I'm already working on now. So this yarn is Knitting Notions. It's hand-dyed yarn, yarn swifts, and more is what the label of that sock yarn came with. And let me see if the camera wants to show you guys. But their site's still active. I don't know how old this yarn is, so I checked online just out of curiosity because I'll tell you later, but I wanted to make sure if I needed to, I could purchase this again. And their site is still active, so it's knittingnottionsonline.com, and in the description box I'll link not only to the sock pattern I'm using, but to the website where this yarn came from. And it's classic merino super sock, hand dyed, 100% superwash merino wool. And there we go with that merino wool again. Is it something about merino wool? Like, this feels nice. Is it the superwash part, or is it just the way merino wool is? I've only worked with superwash merino of the couple projects that I have right now. So please, in the comments, tell me, is this a superwash thing, or is this just the characteristic of merino wool being a lot softer than like Peruvian wool that I was knitting with the Cascade? That yarn's still soft, but it's still a little bit scratchy. Not terribly so, but a little rough compared to the merino wool, which is nice and soft. But is it that superwash effect? I don't know. So if you have a moment to explain that, I would love to read it in the comments and then say, oh yes, thank you for that. And then maybe continue to purchase one or the other for projects to come. So it's 100 grams, approximately 420 yards. The gauge is 8 to 9 stitches per inch, and the needle size is 0 to 1 US size. It says machine wash, dry flat, which is standard of a super wash, and the color is maple. The dye lot is so old, I don't know if this is relevant anymore, but it's 92007, and that would probably be more for me to know if I bought that yarn again later and I wanted to match the dye lot. I would make sure to use this as a reference. And then you see the price tag here. It says $27. And do not quote me, because after I record this, I'm going to go to the site and I'm going to link it, but I think it's like 29 something now, which of course, depending on how old this yarn is, cost of living, cost of production, general inflation would have made this more expensive now, which makes sense, but it's still a very high quality, independently produced yarn. So you usually pay more for indie companies anyway, just because it's a smaller business. They still have bills to pay. They're not doing large batches like if you went to Joann and found super cheap or super inexpensive or affordable yarn versus like a hand cared for, hand dyed yarn. There's a lot more craftsmanship into it, which If you're an avid knitter, you will probably agree with that statement. So 27 bucks at that point, whenever she made the purchase, that's how much this cost. And let me show you what the ball or cake looks like. It came in a hank, of course. A lot of the independent companies, the very luxurious yarn or higher end yarn usually comes in a hank. I've learned that, and it's a pain. I don't really like the winding of the yarn. That's another thing. If you looked at the previous videos, what I don't like about knitting, it seems pretty arbitrary or trivial, I guess you would say, but knitting or winding up the yarn to knit is just a step. I'm like, can it not just already be in a cake? Why does it come in a hank if you already have to wind it? Does somebody know? If you do know, tell me, why is it in a hank and it's not already just wound up so I don't have to do that part? Like, I didn't realize that, and I bought some yarn once from Pearl Soho online. Oh, I just love the layout of that site. Like, all the photos are so pretty. It's also expensive yarn. I have some on reserve for a project I thought I was going to do, but after looking at the pattern, I just wasn't at that level yet. So maybe one day I'll buy the yarn again, but now I found another purpose for it. So I'm going to do something else with it. But long story short, I bought the yarn. I didn't know what a hank was, even though it said it was a hank. It came, and then I'm like, what am I going to do with this? And so being myself, I was like, oh, I'll just start knitting with it. And I just took it apart, and I was like, okay, it's like one big circle. It got tangly. Then I realized I needed a swift and a winder, so I got that and was able to figure it out. And so everything I've received now, I haven't wound up everything yet, but I do have some hank-like things kind of hanging around that I still need to wind up to have like pretty little cakes that I can store somewhere. But let me give you a close-up. So it's like this nice yellow and brown variated, I guess like an ombre. If you looked at it, it was kind of like a tie-dye, kind of dip dye thing. Yarn experts probably know how better to explain that than me, but I'm just like, it's a pretty kind of gradient type of color scheme with the colors. I guess you call it variegated? Is that when it kind of ombres? Like, it's not a sharp stripe like a self-striping yarn where you have a distinction between each color, but it's kind of like they kind of fade in and out of each other. It's very pretty. I personally wouldn't have gravitated towards this color, but I'm lucky it was free. Considering that price, I wouldn't have thought to pay that out of my own pocket for it as a beginner knitter to knit some socks, but since she had it available, she didn't want to use it. The one thing I want to note, I don't know if it was just this hank or if it was a fluke, but when I was winding it up, there were just like little bits of string, and I made sure to cut the appropriate string, so it wasn't that I cut through the middle of it and it was just doing its thing. I think that the hank itself just came really weird, and they're just odds and ends of strings, and I've kept most of it, but some of the pieces were just too short to knit with. So depending on how far I can get with this particular cake, I have kind of big hands, but you can see it's not too big considering how much more I'll need to knit of this. I may need to revisit that site and get another hank, because I don't want to knit just one sock, but because I have all of these odd size strings of yarn that I would need to attach together to keep knitting. I don't know if it'll be too knotty in the inside against the foot to make sense to do it. So we'll see. The other hank is in my craft room that I was filming in the other day, so we'll see if I have to bring that out. It's just hanging out in the box. So right now we have this cake from a hank that was the fullest part, that was all one string, and we have the knitting here. So let me show you what I've got so far. Make sure I don't lose the other DPN that I am knitting with. Oh, here it is. Okay, so let me scooch in a little bit. So we have this pattern. The cuff is right here, so I'm just starting with the design, and you can kind of see it. There's like regular knitting on the edge, and then in the middle there's like this garter stitch design going. I'm sure when it's longer it'll make more sense, but right now I can see it where this part in the middle is going to be on the top of the foot, and then you just keep doing that. And for where I am right now in the pattern, I have to knit, how long do I have to knit? Let's see. All right, so this is, it's not the heel flap. I think it's just the top of the foot. They label each part where it's cuff, heel flap, heel turn, gusset, and foot. I don't know what those all mean, but I'm just gonna follow what the instructions say. But cuff, it just says to knit the cuff, switch to the larger needles, and keep working until the piece is, let's see, for the size I am knitting, I have to knit until it is 6.5 inches from the cast on, ending with around 1. And so it's a two row pattern through and through for this one. And the brand, actually, let me tell you about my DPNs while you're knitting. They're like a light pink, corally pink color, but they're Pony brand. And I wish I could give you the backstory on how I found these. And you may already be familiar with the brand Pony, Pony, but somehow I saw them and thought they were really cute. And I found some of them on this site called Scratch. I don't know if it's Scratch Supply or Scratch Supply Company, like Co, or if it's just Scratch, but I will link their site in the description box. And the way to navigate to these particular DPNs isn't straightforward, so I think I just did a search for Pony and found them that way. At the time they were just launching and were offering free shipping for any order amount. And so what they had in stock at the time of these DPNs, I was able to get quite a few of them. And then the rest that I needed, I got at yarn.com. I got cut off, so I'm going to say, repeat a little bit and then chop out wherever it got weird. But the Scratch Supply had the DPNs, and I was able to get free shipping for what I wanted at the time. And then what I didn't find in stock there, I went to yarn.com and was able to find some other of the sizes that I needed. Now, when I check out yarn.com again, some of them are still out of stock, and I don't know if they're just rotating out when they get a new shipment from the vendor and then they restock, or if they're out, they're out. I almost had a false alarm with something else I bought from yarn.com, but I made sure that I was on the email notifications, so when they were back in stock, I knew about it. Hi guys, we had a few technical difficulties, so I usually try to just record in one go from start to finish, but my video kept cutting out, and it's because my phone, its internal memory doesn't allow me to have a lot of different videos on it, and thankfully I was able to upload some of these to my computer already, so it was safe to delete them. So I had to go back and delete them, and I couldn't figure out why I kept stopping my recording, and it's because the memory was too full for more video footage. So, to carry on, I wanted to say that I am usually drawn to color. As I mentioned, one of my favorite colors, at least my favorite color, is blue with variations of teal, turquoise, aqua, whatever you want to call it. Variations of those colors. Bluey greens are really something I gravitate to. Jewel tones, purples, and anything really bright and pretty. You put something pretty and colorful in front of me, and I'm like, wow, I don't know what it does, but I really want it, and that's a problem, you know. But at least as far as knitting products go, I was really happy to find some that were cute and colorful. And this pony brand, I was drawn to it because the DPNs I saw, I can't remember if I saw somebody using them directly in a video or if I just was browsing and found them and thought they were really cute. But however I got to them, I can't remember. I was so glad that I was able to find an array of sizes of DPNs. And if anybody knows where I can find fixed circular needles or straight needles that are also cute and colorful like these, let me know. I tried looking on Amazon, but I didn't see much. Whoopsie. And I didn't see much on Amazon, but at webs.com they did have DPNs that were pony brand. And some of them are not in stock at the moment, which I may have mentioned earlier before the weird thing with the camera, but I just bought whatever I could find in stock of the sizes I wanted that I was not able to find on the Scratch site and had them come. So this is that, what size are we working with right now? I think we're working with number 2. Yes, US size 2, because we were doing the cuff with a smaller set, and now we've switched to US size 2 DPNs. And I want to say, if you don't like plastic, you probably won't like these. If you don't mind so much, then you might like them. They're pretty, at least the thinner ones are kind of like bendy. You can see it turning a little bit. And some of the reviews on yarn.com mention that they snap. I haven't had that happen yet, but I also am not a very aggressive knitter. So I don't know if you have to be super gentle, or depending on what kind of work you're doing, you might have to bend them a little bit, and that could just make them a little weak. But this one, you could see it in person better, but there's like this little rod inside of the plastic, and I think that's to keep the structure, to keep it enforced so it doesn't snap like that, considering it is plastic and it's very thin. But the point is kind of blunt. It's not a very sharp point. I like the plastic, I like the metal, I like the varnished wood materials to use as needles, and I find that these are just the right amount of grip because I'm working so close together. Like, these aren't very long, and comparing them to like a longer straight needle, you have not as much room for forgiveness if your stitches were to slide off. It's like, that's it, especially because you have points on both ends. There's nothing holding them really there besides the material of the needles themselves. And so they're kind of like a good in-between with metal and with wood, because I do have some wood DPNs that are the what's her name? Deborah Norvell? I'm probably getting that wrong, but they are usually carried at Joann's, and they're part of the Premier brand yarn. You'd probably see them. She used to do the Wheel of Fortune, I think. No. She used to do something on TV. She wasn't Vanna White, because that's the Wheel of Fortune, but she did something on TV. She liked knitting. She created this partnership with, I think, Premier brand yarns, and so she has different, like acrylic or wool blend yarns at Joann's, or maybe even other large chain craft stores, and she has her own set of knitting needles, both interchangeable circulars, fixed circulars, single point, and DPNs. And I have a little bit of a variety of the straight needles as well as the DPNs, a couple sizes of those. And I like them. I just like the varnished wood. It slides around. That could be a whole separate video, honestly, of just me talking about my preferences on needles and things like that. But what are your preferences? What do you prefer? Is there a material of needle that you gravitate toward when you knit? So let me go ahead and get started. Well, actually, no. I'm going to complain to you a little bit about this because this part trips me up. And it's when I have to knit on DPNs, and then the jump between the knit and a purl, if it's like a space, like 2 needles, like I have to start my first stitch on the second needle as a purl after I've just either purled or knit. I always get stuck on how do I hang the yarn, because it's just kind of floating there. It's easier for it to be a knit, but for some reason when I have to make sure it's in the front, it's like I totally forget where the yarn should lay behind the needle that's in front of it, if that makes any sense. So sometimes I end up twisting my stitches because I just want to get that stitch on the needle, and then when I go around the second time I catch where I messed up, and then I just flip it at that point. But do you have some way to memorize where the yarn should be, or is it just something that naturally comes to you? Let me know in the comments as well how that goes. Alright, so enough of me gabbing without actually doing anything, because the point of me is to also to knit. So I'll go ahead and start my next round, and some of this you might find me stopping and I look like I'm mumbling to myself, and that's just so I keep track of how far I need to go before I have to switch the stitch. So it kind of gets weird, and this is one of the more challenging projects I have because I don't want to take it on the train, because if I do and I end up losing count and having to look at my pattern a lot, it just kind of defeats the convenience of it for me, which is why I think I would have been better off starting with a traditional vanilla sock that's just stockinette until I get to the point where I need to really pay attention to what I'm doing. But if not, you know, it is what it is, and I'm really excited to see what this looks like finished, especially considering I'm not a pro yet. But I know it's going to take a while because it is small yarn, like thin yarn. This is the first time I've used sock weight. Okay, so here we go. We're at the weird part where I'm at another DPN and I'm still purling here. And okay, I wish you could see. If I had an overhead camera, you would be able to see like this dilemma I'm in, because I'm like, okay, it's kind of just hanging loose and I need to catch it and wrap it around, and then it's getting all tangled up. This one tricky part about DPNs is that there's so many of them that it just kind of gives me anxiety, but they're cute. So at least I got cute ones, so even if I'm a little bit worried about what I'm doing, I don't feel like it's that bad, I guess. But if you can relate at all, please let me know in the comments, because I don't want to feel like I'm crazy. But I'm also relatively new at this. I have not knit legit socks that are more of a traditional sock pattern, so I feel like it kind of gets hung up just on kind of wrapping my head around how these all work together, especially because you cast on that way and it's little. Also, when I see a pattern and it says join in the round, what do you do? I usually just start knitting. There have been a couple times where I like crisscrossed the last 2 stitches, but then it kind of threw off where the beginning of the round started for me, at least as far as where the string is on that cast on, like the tail part of it, I guess. I don't know. It just looked weird to me, and I'm like, well, is this the beginning now because I started here, or is this the end? And I don't know. Do you just start knitting the next round with that working yarn, or do you flip your stitches so that they kind of like crisscross each other? What do you do? Let me know. And I also don't have a place marker on this one yet because my tail's so long. I know that at least right now, since I haven't combined any stitches on like 2 DPNs, that I know where the beginning and end of my round are based on the 4th DPN being where the very long tail is. So I know if I'm at the DPN where the long tail kind of lines up, I'm at the end of my round. And so I know to start that other row with the next pattern instruction part. And then I also have to remember to kind of push these down so they're closer to the middle of the work, so I don't run the risk of dropping my stitches. Heaven forbid I trip and fall, or a cat gets into what I'm working on and I end up like having to lose some stitches. That at least they're kind of in the middle, so hopefully most of them are saved if something like that were to happen, but you never know. Okay, so we're almost to the last row. We're on our last needle right now, so I can finish that up and then continue on with the next rounds. And I was gonna say something. Oh yeah, I have one more active project to show you, and then at that point I will have finished all of the show and tell of the current projects I am working on that are for the holidays. However, I realized that there's a holiday, or it's not really a holiday. My partner's cousin got married last October, so October 21st of 2018. He got married, and we went to the wedding, and even though we considering that I'm more of the person who does like the gift idea stuff, I was the one who looked at the registry and got he and his wife what they were looking for, what they had asked for, but it just, I'm not that much of a baller, despite what you may assume. You may already figure that out, or not, but I wanted to give them a little something for their anniversary that's coming up this year. And I want to do another video after I show you guys my last active project, and that'll be me starting another one that is in relation to the anniversary gift that I want to give them for their first year anniversary in this October. And because it's already mid-May, knowing how fast I don't knit, I think it'd be a good idea to introduce it to you guys as well, and it can be one of the new projects that I integrate. And I feel like that being prioritized makes sense because October is going to be here before December when these other projects are due. So if I have to segue from the holiday gifts I'm planning to finish up, that at least it's a new project and it's not going to stack up with the other ones that I'm working on. So we'll see. Oh, see, I twisted it. I twisted this one like I thought I would because it's doing a backwards, I think of it as like it's 2 legs on a saddle and it's turned the other way. And so the front yarn should be leaning toward where I'm knitting, and then the back leg should be toward the old stitches, and it was not, it was switched. So I don't know, it's weird. It's a weird thing. I think we're at the point where with all of the weird jump cuts I've had to experience, and I'm sorry you had to endure that, I've learned something new. My phone isn't as cool as I thought it was, though it is very cool, and I'm very glad I can actually use it right now because I was very eager to make this channel. Just to let you know, a lot of the content I watch has become very toxic lately, and if you are also familiar with what I might be alluding to, you can agree. Perhaps, especially some of the more well-known people in that community creating content on a daily. Some things have happened. Geez, I feel like the past year or so, it's just been really bad. And I stuck with it, and I found that I'm just so over it right now that going back to just simple knitting stuff, there's no drama here, and that's what I want and that's what I need. I think a lot of people just need to kind of change things up sometimes. And so I'm making this channel with these videos to kind of offer myself a little bit of sanity and hopefully give you some content to view while you knit as well, if you happen to be a person like me who was drawn to that community. And I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to add to it and bring it here, but I'll just say it's nice and refreshing to be in a different space right now. And with all that being said, if you find that you enjoy this, please give it a like, comment down below with your own experiences, and I hope that in the next one I'll be able to show you some more of my projects as well as introduce some new ones. Alright, thanks for stopping by.